Szeretettel köszöntök mindenkit az egészséges gyermek.
A wonderful privilege to welcome all of you here at the Children's Mental Health conversation. I would like to introduce the participants. First of all, Ilona Nagy, coach, school improvement officer, and also Bence Sipka, psychologist, digital addiction expert, the founder of Tech Balance Center, where they give advice to parents and children. And Noemi Wieg is assistant professor, developmental trauma specialist, psychologist, and she is working hard for school psychologists not to feel isolated. Of course, I did not share everything that they do, but I wanted to give a brief insight. Now, the first topic is how the digital world affects children of different age if they get in touch with it. We have an Hungarian Academy of Science paper, which was published today, which says that the speech therapist doing work among kindergarten teachers, what they found is that the performance of kindergarten-aged children have a deteriorating condition. They cannot perform as well as kids who were in kindergarten just 3 or just 5 years ago. Especially, they examined the COVID period. There has been a deterioration of that scale in recent past. What is your take? What is your insight regarding the digital world and kindergarten age kids? Noemi, Bence, either of you? I have many different ideas. I will try to go by order. First of all, when it comes to kindergarten teachers, actually there are different sides, two sides. It's not just their device usage, but the device usage of the parents. If the parents themselves, with their messenger chatting and they're basically spending time on YouTube, they are communicating less and less with their children, which keeps the children's development back. Now, if I spend time with my child and the phone rings, will I stay in that situation or will I pick the phone up instead? And of course, you have the other question, which affects children directly, namely that either when it comes to kindergarten age students, children, or even older ones are given tools. I have this scary example when there is a family of difficult background and they grew up in a way that the 1.5-year-old child is on the couch, on the family sofa, looking at the cartoon while the mother is tapping away on her phone by her side. What is the case with the period before kindergarten age? Let me take a couple of steps back. Now, our connection with technology is like the first part of Jurassic Park. You know, in the sequel, when they arrive to the island, and they say, oh, it's wonderful dinosaurs that we see everywhere. And in the 90s, the different technologies and their arrival, the broadband, internet, animation, computer games, brought about this feeling. And then 30 years later, we feel that these dinosaurs are out of their cages and they pose some sort of a problem or different problems. For example, it brings about social polarization, fake news, dependencies. And what you can see is that you can't really adapt to these really fast technological changes. So basically, our social norms do not keep track of the development that is taking place around us. And what Noemi mentioned, we experience many of those in our everyday life. These are all about these norms, how we use the technologies. These norms are not developed yet. So actually, they just happen to be there. Actually, there was a phone, and then what came about is that you can tap away on your phone even while you're here at the conference. What would this conference be like if you weren't tapping on your phone? But there is this norm that you can tap away. This is our decision as an individual, as a community. What is it that we consider to be acceptable regarding technological usage? Now, coming back to kindergarten age students and the period before that, actually the biggest issue is what example are we showing? Now, the biggest problem is if there are issues. And for example, when we use the technology for emotion control, if you are bored, if you are anxious, you pull the phone out. If you feel bad, you look at Instagram posts. And if there is a temper tantrum, then you give the phone to the child. Now, actually, emotion control is occurring through the device. If you feel bad, just look at the screen. But to be honest, that's not what healthy emotion control is all about. But basically, you have to tune to your child's feelings. You take note of their intonation, tone of voice, and then you adapt to that. And here we have the smartphones, the technology. There was a research conducted at ELTE University, and they examined the quality of the connection between the mother and children. If the smartphone is there, it deteriorates. There are lesser interactions, and the emotional hints are not noticed by the mother, which is actually given by the child. Now, I would like to take the word back for a second. I think there is a very important expression, what Bence also mentioned, namely, that our device usage very much influences the children. But I think at this point, it is the device using us, not us, the tool.
And what I also like to explain to parents is that when they struggle with how they can actually socialize their children for the appropriate use of digital devices, well, they are actually standing in front of a lot of marketing developers, etc., who want us to use mobile phones as much as possible. So everything is shaped in a way whereby they influence our feelings, mind intensely. So who wouldn't want to get in touch with the love immediately or learn about some news or better understand the world that's around us? And of course, we can feel that it's good, and whose advertisements are present on these platforms, well, those companies enjoy it even more. And it takes time for us to learn that we shouldn't be used by the devices, but we should use the devices when and as we need them. And it's still a learning stage. If you allow me, I would add a very important thought, because the paradigm in pedagogy is that we respond to the experience and then we take action at the end of this process. And I think we are at the coming towards the end of the 10th year of gathering experiences, and finally we started to respond to these perceptions and experiences. We understand how these devices are influencing our feelings. There is addiction, etc. There is now scientific research as well supporting the ideas that we felt, that we suspected, but we couldn't say for sure. And I believe that it's important to talk about these things together, because individually we all try, we all know the limiting, like the time limit functionality, and we also try and communicate very nicely offline during our day-to-day activities, but we don't really invest enough attention and energy to that. So perhaps we are entering an age of reflection when we are going to contemplate things together, not just individually, but with the power of the community. And talking of reflections, experiences, and solutions, so what are your experiences with the Digitalization Act freshly introduced back in September, where children cannot take mobile phones to the school or use mobile phones at the school. Noemi, do you see happier children or quite the opposite? Okay, I wouldn't expect children to be happier, so I wouldn't say it that way. What I think is very important here is, well, I work in a Catholic school in the first district, and it's the kind of social environment where parents have been in contact with us, wanting to talk to us about how we are regulating it at school or at home. I think we went to the other extreme because 8 years ago I had to warn the parents when children shouldn't be using the digital devices in a certain situation. Now we got to a stage where I need to try and convince the parents of children in upper elementary school that maybe it's not bad if they totally ban children up until the age of 16 and they should let them learn about these devices. So we are trying to find the right path on this side of parents and teachers as well. As to what the exact consequences are, we don't know yet exactly, but we should perhaps say to young people that, okay, let's try how it feels to spend time without your phones. Try what it feels like when you cannot actually immediately use your phones in the break, but have to spend time with each other. So I think it's already a good stop sign. And I must say that the schools, teachers are still trying to find ways of getting this right. So the regulation is there, but the logistics are difficult, like how do you take away the phones from children, how do you give it back, how do we develop their digital skills. So it's a difficult task that schools are struggling with, but children are alive. They started to make friends with the new regulations. And of course, it's also a wonderful opportunity for pushing the limits. Some children have an extra phone. They try to somehow bypass the system. But something is happening. And the fact that we started talking about it and regulating it is an incredibly important task. You said, Imre, during the previous discussion that it would be very important to work on children not perceiving it as a punishment, but use the freed up time as a present. That's true. I work with schools, and many schools, before the enforcement of the act, introduced rules whereby children couldn't use a mobile phone during school lessons, only if the teacher asked them to do so for certain specific tasks. And actually, I must say, we were really missing the act because it's making it easier for the school. It's not just the school that has to actually overcome the resistance of even parents, because sometimes even parents say that this is what gives security or safety to children. But is that actually true, I ask? But in any case, parents want children, teachers to be accessible. Children are also happier when they can make a quick call home. So this is the world surrounding us. And of course, there was COVID as well, when digital education overtook the scene for a year and a half with some breaks. And compared to that, we are where we are. And in agreement with Noemi, I would also say that, yes, we need to learn how to best use this time without a phone as a present. We, in the old days, who were playing football on the sports course or walked in the field and picked up snails or whatever, not many children know this kind of feeling these days. But it would be very good to somehow, together with friends and family and classmates, etc., we could live in the present, be present, and live through it as a present. And I think this is where we have a major task and responsibility at the same time. So I would take 2 steps back and say that technology in reality is not a means, in a sense that it's not, people are not passively suffering these experiences. We are in connection with technology, and it has a backward impact on us. And the way it impacts us, the way it changes our perceptions, feelings, and decisions is quite often unconscious in the given moment or even in the long term. Just to let me give you an example. When I look in a telescope, I get extra visual information, but it narrows my focus, and I'm actually losing contact with the other four senses, and I'm only relying on visual information, and I may not realize that there is a ditch right in front of my feet. And that's what technology does to our perception as well. It creates some impact by influencing our senses. And what happens in society now is that, for example, through the ban of mobile phones in the school, we get to know our partner, meaning technology, better and better, not just the smartphones, but everything. And we try and somehow steer it back to a more healthy position. And I think overall it's good. And we can see such regulations being introduced globally. And obviously we need to measure the impact. We should judge whether there is, or assess whether there is any improvement in the performance or mood of school children, and I very much hope to see some research results in the near future. What I would add to this conversation is that there is always this expectation that let's not do a witch hunt. Technology is not the worst thing. We always say that we are worried about children, but of course children who are bullied at school can still make friends online. We can access information, connections in certain situations. But the big pattern, the big sample, the big numbers truly show that not only children but our society also suffers from it. The degree of loneliness is dramatic. And actually, evolutionary, people need partnership, connections, which is a basic need for our health, physical and mental. And if I turn to Netflix in the evening and not to my neighbor, and if I need some flour, I order it from Kifli and not just pop to my neighbor. These really significantly impact our well-being, and therefore we indeed need to contemplate how it should be and what it is we should do. And just one more thing, in my experience, in my environment, the adults and children are suffering most from total exhaustion from running around all the time, which is the biggest causative factor of stress, because I believe that I can do everything in the moment. I can already check which bus I should take tomorrow. But I personally would be very happy if I didn't receive 40 emails a day, but they would send a like a dove with a message. And of course, if I read an email, I immediately need to respond, so I go from one information situation to the other, so that part of me is always in motion. Okay, I would just add one sentence, yes. When your phone is on the table, it already disturbs intimacy. Our attention gets fractured, and we experience that as adults. And it's a nice but sad story that one of the teachers told us at the school, that in September, when they introduced the ban on the phone, children actually kiss their phone before they put it in the box. So that points to an emotional connection with the device, and it shows that there is work to do. I'd like to tell you about a personal experience when, as a representative of the children's organization, I went to 8th graders to talk about free participation. I asked them about how they were, and they all said tired. And I was so surprised when several children in a classroom say that they are tired. it's not really my image of childhood. But then we had a full-day children's activation program attended by the same children plus another 200 children. And at the beginning of the day, we asked them how they felt, and we did the same at the end of the day. And everyone wrote it down or drew it on a piece of paper. And when I took out these scraps of paper to see what comes out of them, I was actually really shocked to see that in the morning when they arrived, on every third scrap of paper or every 2.5 paper, it was written that they were tired. And after the full day of physical programs, only about 10% said they were tired, and everyone else was happy. And I thought I would have been the other way around. I would have been fresh in the morning and then tired by the evening, and I wouldn't go on Netflix, I would need to sleep, etc., etc. But technology and smartphones actually have an impact indirectly. So the reduction in the quantity of sleep, which is clear from the data gathered, on average, a US teenager 20 years ago, 30% slept less than 7 hours, and now it's double. So more than 60% of teenagers sleep less than 7 hours. And if we sleep less than 7 hours, especially at a time when it's very important for the development of our nerves, it's a little bit like as if we had an alcoholic snap to start with every morning before we start the day. And as the executive director of Netflix said very openly, he said their biggest competitor is not YouTube, but sleep. This is the real problem, the hours that it takes from sleeping and also exercise, as said. People have much less exercise, which is very important for stress management and the regulation of emotions. So once again, I like to add two things. The first being is that we very easily push that responsibility onto youngsters, and at the same time, it would be nice not to just say, okay, son, switch off your computer and go out and play football. But as responsible adults, we should say, let's go together, because the best example is the best way. A good example is the best way of making youngsters copy it and work in the right way. And I don't know how many adults could truthfully say that they can use their own digital devices in an exemplary way, in a fully controlled way. I don't think there are too many, including me. And talking about the impact of Netflix on sleeping, well, another heavy issue is what it is we think about life. Of course, the narrative always says that we hear stories about what makes us happy, what's okay, and that will determine how we evaluate the things that happen in our lives. And obviously that didn't happen yesterday. Already with television, we tend to believe that life is in a Hollywood, like in a Hollywood film or a Netflix series. So narratives are available everywhere on TikTok, Netflix, YouTube, but they are not quite as realistic as if people talk to each other, hearing real stories about life. And then the question arises as to who should regulate children or control children in the evening. Well, I think it should be parents, and in more and more parent groups, parents ask as to how long they should consistently say no to afternoon social media use so that children leave me alone. And they were saying, like, if you persevere for 1 to 2 months, they will not ask anymore. So what can a parent truly do in this situation? I believe that, as we discussed before, it's the struggle of the individual. So it all depends on how a family can create new habits by going out to play football together or baking together or dad taking a young boy out to the garage to do some DIY work. So perhaps for city children it's more difficult to spend time together, but I think it all starts with joint experiences, whether we can give alternatives to youngsters, to our children, alternatives that give them new experiences and can replace the use of devices at an emotional level. So it's very difficult, but I think it again starts with the common habits of the family. And if you can start working well as a family within the family, it may have an impact on our broader environment, or it may be possible to create some habits that the children, parents can join. And we also need a small change of attitude that in X number of years will create the desired state, whether it will no more be a question as to how and when to use mobile phones. But I couldn't give you an exact timeline. Just a short example. Actually, the same thing doesn't come up about chocolate or gum bears because we already know them, but actually they do exactly the same. They trigger a response that is pleasant for everyone. Well, practically there is no other solution than learning to say no. When parents turn to me with a question as to want to give a child a phone, and it's a similar topic, I always say that first the parents should look at their relationship with the child. If there is enough trust, if the relationship is strong enough, and whether they feel that their child can look after the responsibilities they should look after day to day, they do well at school, they have friends, they have hobbies, and if it's all good, then they can give a phone to the child. It will still be difficult, but it will not undermine the mental health of the child. But if there are issues with this, and they also give them a phone, it will deepen the existing conflicts. So first, I believe, we should always start by developing the offline capabilities and skills, and once they are stable, we should add the digital capabilities, including the use of gadgets.
It would be the legislative rules and regulations that could help the parents. And actually, there is a most recent act which was passed in Australia from November this year onward. Everyone under the age of 16, they will be banned from the big social media platforms, and it will be checked and verified as well. I was very surprised that no such rule exists elsewhere. Do you welcome this decision, or what's your take? I would start by saying that we have to understand how the technology affects us. We conducted research at ELTE, and actually the students, the participants, had to use a gray filter on their phone. They hated it. They said, oh, my phone was disgusting to look at. I do not like it, do not enjoy it. And actually, by the end of the 2-week period, their screen time was reduced by an average 60 minutes. And compared to the control group, their score for depression and anxiety was also much lower. Now, the colors, simply the colors of the screen, that it's exciting to look at the screen, this brings about joy. So the research participants reported that social media usage wasn't so exciting. They didn't scroll that much. They didn't use TikTok or Instagram too much because they didn't feel it enjoyable. And this morning, someone said that we work in a way that we want to maximize enjoyment and we want to minimize suffering. And to be honest, the technological usage very much reflects this. We use technologies in everyday life 90% of the time, which are very enjoyable, and you require no effort, and it is not frustrating to use them. There is another presentation where there were images of the brain and the reward center of the brain, And then actually the computer games can activate that part of the brain, which is also activated by spending time with your best friends or with your love. So actually we have to understand how the brain works, because if in this reward center we do consecutively enjoyable activities, actually the level of dopamine, a very important neurotransmitter, reduces. And this is why you experience pain. You come into this situation that, oh no, I don't want this type of a situation. And let me now come back to the previous topic, that actually this huge regulatory framework and settings, I believe that those technologies which are very enjoyable and you require no effort to use them, those should be somehow limited in terms of access, or maybe for vulnerable groups, or there could be age limits introduced. But those technologies which are about their effort, that they require some sort of an effort to be able to use it, and then actually that brings about some sort of a positive aspect. And this is how you are to motivate the learning of the students. These type of initiatives and solutions are good. Now, coming back to your question, let me add that if someone in the room were to pull out their packet of cigarette and then you started smoking, we would be appalled by that. 80 years ago, that wasn't the case. Now, based on research, we know that the phone is equally harmful for your mental and emotional and physical health. If you were to pull your phone out, we would be less shocked and surprised. I do hope that these legislative regulations, slowly but surely, maybe the phones will be sold in a box that for your healthy development, you should limit its use, or something like that. Now, talking about social media, has it ever happened in the school that there were children under the age of 16 were affected by online harassment? Only these cases, not because it ceases above the ages of 16, but children are better at handling this above 16. My image is that the online space is like the island of the Lord of the Flies. And then the children are just as cruel to one another as Lord of the Flies children were with one another. And actually, if there are children who have good connections with adults and they have good moral senses, they will report this type of bullying. They will react and then handle this type of bullying. And of course, social media is a hotbed for all these sorts of bullying. Now, actually, I really like this image. What is it that you could do regarding the future? One part of the problem is that we left the children alone in the digital realm, and then they are underprotected. I think the solution in the future will be that if there was some sort of a Lord of the Flies until now, it will be Harry Potter, the solution, because technological usage is like a magic wand. Young people, especially when it comes to access to higher technologies, should be handled just like in Roxford, that you can only practice and use these skills with the supervision of older people. And I'm talking about, of course, AI as well. Now, Ilona, if I'm not mistaken, at the Jesuits, you are working on a pilot project to turn the Lord of the Flies into a Harry Potter world. Yes, it's very interesting. Yes, we have had this practice that the phone usage is minimized, and then the children can have this. Of course, we have these, little solutions. Well, we connected with Bence earlier, and we started talking about it. And of course, we try to keep the usage back, but there are lots of other challenges. Now, the school said, what is it that we can figure out? How can we create a Harry Potter style school? And then Bence is an expert, and our colleagues started thinking about to create something. What can you do? Now, actually, we have launched a one-year process where the teachers and the parents and the students explored the challenges together, which actually the challenge is not what we do with our phone, because the Act has already taken care of this, because we started working on this in the spring, and then you have the language of the chat, and then the children's emotional attachment to their phone. And then we started talking with the participants about what the usage of digital tools bring about in our everyday life. We involve the parents into that, the students as well. As we heard earlier, we have to consider the children as partners, and together with the adults. Of course, I'm not talking about a 2-year-old, but in high schools, you can very much include these children. They have their own experience, and at times they also sense that you should get rid of the phone, if not for anything else, then because my mother can reach me at all times, or it bugs me when I'm having a date with my boyfriend. But you can see that this is a burden for them as well. So we meet on a monthly basis with the colleagues in the parents group and with the students. And then Bence held a webinar series with educational purposes where we train and educate them. And actually, we also learned about the impacts of this tool. And then we have a third member, Anna, and we shall see what new is under the sun, how we can come closer to become a Harry Potter style school. At the end of our conversation, I would like to quote you, Ilona. When we were having a preliminary discussion, you said that we are learning it all together. And you said something very interesting, where the mobile usage is well executed. Actually, there are different research groups in the North Pole who didn't have mobile data, and now they have mobile data. In one season, there are 70, and the other season, there are 150 of them. And actually, they were afraid what would happen if internet became continuously available. And imagine what happened. There is a Hungarian photographer awarded with National Geographic Prize. Everyone was afraid that their social life, which is something like the old farmer's style, would be outdated or eliminated. Actually, what they do is they only use their phones in their own rooms, and social sites, community space in this center, this research center, is only used for social interactions, not for tapping away the phone. I wish each and every one of us to follow the same example so that we might be able to show an example to our children. Thank you for your kind attention.